Tonight, Supreme Court Crossroads.
They said that it would have been allowed to fly had it not been called Christian.
The Christian flag case with implications of private free speech. Plus, the Democrats' election overhaul heading for a downfall. And Republicans and Democrats may not agree on much.
Go ahead, shout it out.
But critics say both ignore a decade-old law aimed at curbing corruption and conflicts of interest.
Sometimes even the far right and the far left coming together and basically saying, wait, why is this legal?
CBN News on the Stock Act. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Fight at the Flagpole as the Supreme Court weighs Boston's refusal to fly a Christian flag at City Hall. Good evening, I'm Jenna Browder. The High Court today hearing arguments in Shurtleff v. City of Boston. Boston says the City Hall flagpole represents its voice, and it's within its rights to speak not speak on the subject of religion. Shurtleff, though, says the flagpole in question is actually considered a public forum, and therefore the city violated the Constitution by discriminating against a religious viewpoint. CBN's Caitlin Burke followed today's arguments. Caitlin, what did the justices zero in on here?
Well, Jenna, the key to this whole case is determining whose voice the flagpole represents, the government's or private citizens. Now, justices really grilled the attorney representing Boston on that question.
When you say anybody can speak by putting up a flag, with these few exceptions, are you not creating a forum for private speech rather than speaking on speaking your own mind?
No, Your Honor, I do believe that the fact that we're talking about the government's own flagpole in front of the government's seat of power, where governments have historically spoken, it's the government's bully pulpit. Everyone would think that is the government speaking.
There are 3 flagpoles outside of Boston City Hall. One flies the American flag, another that of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The 3rd flagpole is meant to celebrate other countries, cultures, and causes. Private organizations simply have to apply to have their banner raised. While the city may have viewed that 3rd flagpole as representing the government's voice, the plaintiff's attorney said its website conveyed a different message.
And the policies specifically written by the city for the 2005 to 2017 include the statement that these are public forums open to all applicants.
Matt Staver with the Liberty Council represents Hal Shurtleff. Shurtleff is the director of Camp Constitution, an organization that applied to fly a Christian flag in honor of Constitution Day. Their request was rejected.
After 12 years with 284 flag-raising approvals, no denials, and usually no review, one word caught the attention of a Boston official, the word Christian on the application.
Staver calls this a case of viewpoint discrimination, accusing the city of using its argument of government speech as a guise for censorship.
Can't the government choose what it wants to say? And if the government makes it clear and it's not, just stamping government speech on it to hide discrimination against private viewpoints, but if the government truly exercises control, wouldn't that be okay?
If the government truly exercised control. Other cities don't open for third-party flags for obvious reasons. Those that do can invite some third-party participation as long as they maintain very specific control of the subject matters and messages, and that it's very clear that it is their speech.
While Boston argued there were clear parameters of the flags it would allow to represent the city, ultimately, the justices expressed that it seemed officials were operating off the belief that allowing a religious flag to fly outside City Hall would be unconstitutional, and that was a mistake.
But in the context of a system where flags go up, flags go down, different people have different kinds of flags, then it is a violation of the free speech part of the First Amendment and not an Establishment Clause violation. The end.
Now, Boston suspended its flagpole program in 2021 pending a decision from the High Court. The attorney representing Boston says officials plan to clarify their policy going forward, explicitly stating that the flagpole represents government speech. Jenna?
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. And here with us now, Roger Gannom, Assistant Vice President of Legal Affairs at the Liberty Counsel. Roger, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. So you listened to the hearing today. What stood out to you?
Well, Jenna, first, thanks for having me. What stood out today was the justices were very skeptical of the city of Boston's argument that by opening their flagpole to all comers, they can still claim that it's somehow Boston's speech going up on that flagpole. The bottom line is the city of Boston cheated. They claimed that this is their speech, but everyone looking at this policy in practice over the last over a decade knows that Boston has opened a public forum, and it wasn't until a Christian group asked to fly its flag that Boston said no for the first time. So we are very confident that we will get a win in today's case.
You know, it seems by saying the flagpole represents government speech, the city of Boston really did make a big mistake. Could they have played it differently, Roger?
Well, if the city truly wanted to control what flags went up on its flagpole, they would have asked to see the flags, for example, when someone applied to raise a flag. But the city never did that. The record in this case shows that the city never really looked at the flags that were presented or proposed to go up on the flagpole. The city certainly didn't own any of the flags. The city never requested a change to the message that was conveyed on a flag. But it's only because our client, Camp Constitution, wrote in its application that it would fly a Christian flag that the city said no. In fact, the city official who said no testified that if the application had simply said the Camp Constitution flag would be raised, he would have said yes to the application. So clearly this is a discrimination against the Christian viewpoint when literally anyone else's flag could be raised. It's only because the application used the word Christian that the official said no in this case.
Could a decision to allow a Christian flag to fly in a public forum allow for maybe some unintended consequences? You know, for example, will we see a satanic flag flying on Boston City Hall's third flagpole?
That's a great question. And the answer is, if it's a truly public forum, then yes, every viewpoint has to be represented. But that really wouldn't be much of a change. As it stands right now on Boston City Hall Plaza, the big open area outside at City Hall, a satanic group or a group who supports ISIS or Al-Qaeda could also wave their own flag and hold a rally or an event in support of those organizations. So when Boston opens its flagpole to all comers, it has to accept all speech and all viewpoints that are proposed. If Boston wants to control the content on that flagpole, it could easily do so, but that's not what it's done over the last 12 or 13 years.
All right, Roger Gannom with the Liberty Counsel. We appreciate you coming on this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Tonight, an election law overhaul barreling towards failure on the Senate floor. After a day of debate on election reform, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer setting up a doomed vote for a last-ditch attempt to change the Senate rules on the filibuster.
Senate Democrats are under no illusion that we face difficult odds, especially when virtually every Senate Republican is staunchly against legislation protecting the right to vote.
Tomorrow's mood vote puts lawmakers on the record. It comes as two linchpin moderate Democrats, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, stay resolute in their opposition to bypassing the filibuster rule. And for more on this, let's bring in CBN News chief political analyst David Brody. David, both sides speaking out now. Republican Mitt Romney now crying foul over a lack of negotiating tact from the White House. He says he never got a call from the White House to create bipartisan voting reform. David, my question to you, who is really to blame here for Democrats' inability to get this across the finish line?
Well, I have two people in name, if you don't mind me naming names on the air, Jenna. How about Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin? That's it. Okay, next question. Just kidding. But look, that's the truth, right? I mean, Manchin and Sinema, and that's it. So I'm going to do some math. You need 50 to change the filibuster. Manchin and Sinema are no's. That's 50 minus 2. Hold on. 48. That's it. That's who's to blame. They don't need Romney. They don't need Republicans. They don't need anybody. They need Manchin and Sinema, and they were never going to get them, and they still don't have them.
Yeah. David, a major sticking point between the both parties, it's election security. The idea of loosening voter ID requirements is really out of the question for most Republicans. But there are areas that Republicans agree that election reform is necessary. Is common ground on this possible, David? And do you think we'll see this issue come back around?
No, there is no common ground able to be done here for a couple reasons. One, this is not something you do piecemeal. I mean, technically, you could do it piecemeal and say, is there a certain part of this that we like or we don't like? And there might be some sort of bipartisan committee that would work on something like that. But the truth of the matter is Democrats want the whole kit and caboodle. They want to federalize national elections. We can go through all of the bill if you'd like, but the bottom line is Democrats want to do that. They want to federalize national elections. Republicans do not want to federalize national elections because, wait for it, they are pretty much into federalism. You know, in other words, let the states and municipalities and localities do their thing. And that's where the rubber meets the road. So in answer to your common ground question, how can you have common ground when you have two divergent philosophies? And I think that's the problem right here, Jenna.
Yeah. David, new polling from NBC pointing to a midterm shellacking for Democrats. You know, the president's poll numbers are in the tank. Democrats are retiring in droves. If history serves as a judge, David, what do you expect come November?
Yeah, it's going to be brutal. It's going to be downright brutal. Here's the problem. This has nothing to do with Republicans, honestly. It has nothing to do with Democrats. It has to do with what's in the middle, the independents. And Biden is sinking with independents. So the problem is he's gone so far to the left that he's lost the independents. And once you lose the independents, that's it. And quite frankly, I mean, just look all around you. I mean, it's not even the polls. I mean, just go to the grocery store. You know, every time you go to the grocery store, and Jenna, look, I love cream cheese. All right. I don't know how I brought cream cheese up in a live shot. I love cream cheese. I can't find any cream cheese at the grocery store. Here's the point. We've all had that thought. We've been like, where is that thing? Oh, man, it's not on the shelves. Well, every time that happens, it's kind of like, what is it? It's a Wonderful Life. What was that scene in The Wonderful Life? Anyhow, anytime that happens, Joe Biden loses another voter. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, you can't go into the grocery store and look at those shelves and go, you think supply chain, and you think Biden, and you think vaccine mandates, and you think the economy, and you think it, you know it. I mean, this is insane, and this is what's happening. So in answer to your question, Jenna, yeah, a shellacking. And that's being nice to shellacking.
All right, David Brody, we have to leave it there. It's always good to have you on. Thank you, David.
You too.
And coming up, remembering Martin Luther King Jr., his niece, Dr. Alvita King, joins us next. Welcome back. Martin Luther King Jr. would have been 93 years old this week. Dr. King died at the age of 39, shot and killed in 1968 in Memphis by an assassin. The famed civil rights leader and American activist changed the world during his lifetime, leading a national movement for civil rights for over a decade that still is being felt today. The Baptist minister was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize during his lifetime. Dr. King drew from the teachings of Christ, preaching a political activism rooted in nonviolence and civil disobedience. And joining us now is his niece, evangelist, Dr. Alvita King, founder of Speak for Life. Alvita, thank you for coming on Faith Nation. It's wonderful to have you. You know, as we honor your uncle this week, what would you like people to most remember about him?
I have been reflecting on my uncle all week, of course, and even my daddy, Reverend A.D. King, my granddaddy, Martin Luther King Sr., his wife, Alberta, the whole family. And I know that Uncle M.L. and my daddy, Reverend A.D. King, are in heaven together with those who have gone before us. One thing that I do remember, he had a quote, and I'm paraphrasing it. If I knew the world was going to fall apart tomorrow, I would still plant my apple tree. And I thought that was so optimistic. Of course, he was a freedom fighter. We know him with the social issues. People don't think as much about him being a preacher and a prophet and his sermons. I have learned more from his sermons than I have from his marches and demonstrations.
Yeah. You know, this week there's been a lot of talk about voting rights and tying legislation to the unfinished work of Dr. King. Alvita, what do you think about that? Do you at all feel like his memory is being weaponized for political purposes?
In some cases, his memory is being weaponized. Of course, I'm 71 years old, and I marched for freedom, for the voting right, for fair housing. I was a youth organizer in the 1960s. So I do remember all of our fights and all of our efforts. I am with the America First Policy Institute, and over at Voter Integrity, where Dr. Ken Blackwell is the chairman, making every vote count, making it easy to vote and hard to cheat. Now, there was something at the turn of the century, the Carter Baker effort to make voting fair. It should be fair. However, you have to remember that the civil rights movement of the 20th century was not run by politicians and rioters. It was run by preachers. Preachers led that movement, so they prayed a lot. So without the prayer that goes with the effort, then we end up with the anarchy that we have now. So I do believe voting rights are important, absolutely. I believe we should have voter ID, because you tell me, if I don't have a voter ID, and you can get them in Georgia for free, they're not hard for anybody to get. So if you say to me, you don't need ID, that's identity theft. You may as well tell me to go back to what they did with the slaves, put an X here. I want people to know who I am. I do. So, yeah.
And, you know, polling bears that out, that most Americans agree with you on that. You know, Dr. King's own children, your cousins, Alvita, have taken up the cause. Martin Luther King III was asked about a statement put out by Senator Joe Manchin. Manchin's statement celebrated your uncle's life but made no mention of voting rights. And this is what your cousin had to say about Manchin's statement. He says, it's frustrating for people to be releasing statements, and you really have not totally adhered to my father's ideals. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I'm 12 years older than Bernice King. That's the youngest of the children of Martin and Coretta King. And I had an opportunity to sit in church with their father and hear his sermons as well as his other issue-oriented speeches. So I know that they have to come together. So I'd like to think of it this way. They're representing Martin Luther King Jr., who led those marches and dealt with issues like Vietnam or with issues like voting rights. All of that is important. I believe to bring balance, we're going to have to put the kingdom of God in there, because righteousness and justice appear together many, many times in the Bible. So I don't even think that we're even at odds. They're presenting one aspect and I'm presenting another. But I know at the end of every day, we have to be led by the Spirit of God with these efforts.
Amen. Amen. Dr. Alvita King, I wish we had more time. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You too.
And we'll be right back. A new report finds the personal finances of our lawmakers often clash with their public duties and potentially break the law. CBN's Tara Merchner reports on how this can affect ordinary Americans.
Excuses from lawmakers range from an innocent oversight to clerical errors. Still, the revelation from this report is causing a show of unity not recently seen on Capitol Hill.
Go ahead, shout it out.
The gentleman is not in order.
Republicans and Democrats may not agree on much these days.
There'll be order in the House.
But Washington observers agree both are guilty of ignoring a decade-old law aimed at curbing corruption and conflicts of interest.
So when you have so many members of Congress, and more importantly, their staffs, that are actively buying and selling stocks that involve the industries and the specific businesses that they help oversee and regulate, it's incredibly concerning.
The 2012 Stock Act requires members to quickly disclose any stock trade made by themselves, a spouse, or a dependent child. Republican Senator Josh Hawley and Democratic Senator John Ossoff don't believe the process is working, and both are pushing bills to end stock trading by members of Congress.
You know, we know that lawmakers are not living up to the standard that they set for themselves, that they're violating the Stock Act's disclosure provision.
This isn't the first attempt at banning members from trading individual stocks. A year ago, House legislation would have required lawmakers, as well as their spouses and children, to put investment assets into a qualified blind trust. Another bill prevented trades for lawmakers and senior staffers, but not family members.
Sometimes even the far right and the far left coming together and basically saying, wait, why is this legal?
The latest debate follows a recent Business Insider investigation and other media reports of 50-plus members of Congress and some 180 staffers violating the Federal Stock Act. The offenses range from being late in disclosing trades to personally investing in industries they oversee. It follows the resignation of Federal Reserve Vice Chair Richard Clarida over questionable trading activity at the start of the COVID pandemic. Clarida apparently wasn't alone. The study reports numerous lawmakers holding, buying, or selling stock connected to COVID-19 vaccine manufacturers. Republican Senator Rand Paul was reportedly 16 months late in disclosing that his wife bought stock in a biopharmaceutical company that manufactures an antiviral COVID-19 treatment.
It makes it incredibly challenging when you have to evaluate decisions about vaccine mandates or how many shots do you have to have from a booster perspective before you're considered fully vaccinated. Are we talking about things that are truly being driven by the science? Or are we talking about things that are driven by these companies that members of Congress are invested in?
Other members are accused of actively shaping policy while investing in corporations that could benefit from their work. They range from military defense contractors to energy companies, media outlets, and more. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, whose husband's holdings include numerous tech companies, is a vocal critic of a stock trade ban.
This is a free market and we are a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that.
Violators of the Stock Act face a fine of about $200, usually waived by Senate or House ethics officials. Now watchdogs and even some lawmakers are using this report to call for stricter penalties. In Washington, I'm Tara Mergener, CBN News.
Finally tonight, an asteroid bigger than the Empire State Building is soaring past Earth right now. It's as close as it's ever going to get, just about 1 million miles away. NASA is preparing for closer calls in the future, but no need to fear now. NASA says this asteroid should pass safely by our planet and won't be back for another 200 years. And that does it for Faith Nation tonight. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.